Massive clash between Hamilton and Leclerc during the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Stay until the end to discover what triggered the intense fight between the two tifosi favorites. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Lewis Hamilton's weekend in Emilia-Romagna spiraled into a full-blown emotional implosion that rattled not just the Ferrari garage but sent shockwaves rippling through the entire Formula One paddock. What had quietly been simmering for weeks between him and Charles Leclerc finally exploded with a ferocity no one anticipated, raw, real, and completely unfiltered. It was more than a post-race outburst. It was a visceral clash of pride, pressure, and personal vendettas. The kind of confrontation that doesn't simply fade away with a press release or a forced handshake. This was a storm years in the making, intensified by expectation, legacy, and the suffocating pressure of racing in red. Everything began to unravel in the moments after the checkered flag, while the smell of burnt rubber still lingered in the air and exhausted engineers scrambled to pack up equipment. Hamilton, visibly worn out and radiating frustration, made his way back toward the Ferrari motorhome in silence. His race suit hung around his waist like a flag of defeat, sweat streaking down his face, eyes locked on the ground but clearly lost in a storm of thoughts. His debrief had been short, clipped, cold. He had offered only a few sentences before standing up and walking out mid-conversation with his performance engineer. Everyone could tell he wasn't just disappointed, he was furious. Minutes later, Charles Leclerc emerged from the garage, his face tight with tension, helmet still on, visor up, lips moving rapidly as he spoke into the radio connected to his headset. He gestured with his hand sharply, clearly issuing orders or perhaps venting to his engineer. What caught everyone off guard was his decision not to go straight to his private room, but instead to head directly into the hospitality suite where Hamilton had been seen pacing like a man on the edge. No one dared to stop him. The mood was thick, unspoken, electric. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Inside, the confrontation began almost immediately. At first, it was a quiet but unmistakable exchange. Words delivered through gritted teeth, faces mere inches apart, eyes locked in a mutual glare that screamed of resentment. But that tension, so fragile and flammable, was never going to remain contained. Within seconds, the voices rose, tones sharpened, tempers ignited. People nearby froze. Phones were put away. No one wanted to be caught recording what could become a scandal of epic proportions. But no one could look away either. Hamilton, eyes narrowed and jaw clenched, gestured toward the door with a sharp flick of his hand and snapped. You're diving into every corner like it's your last lap on Earth. You're sabotaging both of us every damn race. The words dripped with accusation. Leclerc's reaction was instant. His eyes widened, then narrowed, his mouth curled into a sneer. He threw his hands in the air and barked back, "At least I'm not coasting around waiting for someone to tell me I'm still relevant." That hit hard. Hamilton's expression changed. His body stiffened. His hands balled into fists. His response came like a whip. "You think this is about relevance? I've got more championships than you've got race wins. I came here to build something, not watch you destroy it with every reckless move." The room tensed. People glanced toward the exits. A few team members inched closer, uncertain whether to intervene or simply witness the unfolding chaos. But the argument only escalated. Leclerc yanked off his helmet, throwing it onto a table with a crash that startled everyone nearby. Water bottles toppled. Cutlery clattered. His face was flushed with rage, his voice now openly shouting, "You're acting like this team owes you something. You walked in here thinking you'd be the savior, but you don't even understand how we work." Hamilton stepped forward, so close that they nearly touched, his voice lower now but cutting like glass. "I don't need saving. I need a teammate who isn't trying to prove he's the alpha in every corner. You're not just fighting for yourself, you're killing the team's momentum, lap after lap." Leclerc didn't flinch. "And you're dragging us down with your drama. You show up, do your media rounds, talk about energy and legacy, and then deliver mediocrity on race day." Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. That line nearly pushed Hamilton over the edge. His hand slammed against the table, rattling everything on it. For a second, it seemed like punches might fly. The tension was so thick you could feel it humming in the air. Engineers and senior staff rushed in, forming a human wall between them. Voices tried to calm, diffuse, de-escalate. But the damage had already been done. Everyone who witnessed it said the same thing afterward. This wasn't an argument about racing lines or strategy. This was personal. Deeply personal. Outside the walls of the suite, word began to spread with the speed of a radio transmission. Journalists lingered, sniffing the scent of drama. Team personnel whispered nervously, glancing over their shoulders. Security was on high alert, though never officially called in. Meanwhile, PR managers were already scrambling, drafting statements, coordinating who would face the media and who would politely decline. By the time Hamilton appeared for his post-race interview, the transformation was stark. He wore sunglasses despite the dim evening light, his voice flat and rehearsed. Tough race. A lot to look at. We'll regroup. Leclerc never showed up at all. In the hours that followed, Ferrari's senior leadership held emergency meetings. Vasseur met with both drivers individually, attempting to assess the fallout and piece together a plan to contain the blaze. Rumors of separate briefings, isolated engineering teams, and split travel itineraries started circulating. The team's social media went dead silent. No behind-the-scenes content. No jovial podium pictures. Just a black and white photo of the car in park firm, captioned with a single word, focus. But the paddock wasn't buying the facade. Everyone knew what they'd heard. Some said this was the beginning of the end for Ferrari's dream duo. Others speculated that one of the two would be forced out by mid-season if the dynamic didn't improve. Even rival teams were stunned. One McLaren strategist whispered that it was like watching a marriage collapse in real time. Behind the flashbulbs and the press statements, two men were left seething in private, their mutual respect fractured, their partnership broken. Hamilton, still fighting to write his final legacy chapter. Leclerc, desperate to protect what he believes is his team. Neither willing to back down. Both convinced they're in the right. And with Monaco just around the corner, a circuit that demands unity, trust, and absolute synchronicity between drivers and engineers, Ferrari now faces not just a technical challenge, but an emotional war zone inside their own garage. The real race has only just begun, and it's not on track. The air inside the Ferrari garage was thick with tension, almost suffocating, as the final echoes of the race died down and the reality of the internal explosion began to unfold. It was more than a disagreement. It was more than a clash of opinions. It was a full-blown ideological war between two titans of Formula One, each unwilling to yield an inch. As mechanics moved around awkwardly, pretending to focus on post-race duties, it was impossible to ignore the storm brewing in plain sight. Hamilton, adrenaline still pulsing through his veins, stood face to face with Leclerc in a confrontation that had been years, perhaps careers, in the making. Their eyes locked, body language brimming with unspoken accusations, and their voices grew louder, sharper, more venomous by the second. Team engineers, some of whom had only recently transferred from Brackley with Hamilton, others who had been loyal to Leclerc for years, rushed in to place themselves physically between the two drivers. Their presence wasn't a suggestion, it was a necessity. The garage, usually a space of surgical precision and calm under pressure, had turned into a battlefield of ego and raw emotion. According to multiple eyewitnesses, the tension was so tangible that some team members chose to step away, unable to stomach the volatility of the scene. What started as a disagreement over post-race strategy escalated into a confrontation that pierced the very soul of the Scuderia. Voices rose above the din of tools and screens. Hamilton's words cut like a blade, unmistakable in their fury. If this team can't manage two drivers without imploding, then maybe one of us shouldn't be here. That wasn't a comment, it was a detonation. The phrase silenced everything. Laptops froze mid-update, comms chatter ceased, heads turned. It was as if the world stood still. And there, on the receiving end, stood Charles Leclerc. His face didn't flinch. His stare didn't waver. He absorbed the blow, jaw clenched so tightly it looked like he might snap a molar. And then, calmly but with icy precision, he responded. Then say it. Say it if you want me gone. The words were quiet but powerful, soaked in defiance and hurt. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Insiders later confirmed that this was not an isolated meltdown. The clash at Imola had been years in the making, fueled by a season riddled with distrust, diverging philosophies, and behind-the-scenes power plays. Since the first pre-season test in Bahrain, there had been quiet murmurs of friction, but those whispers turned into unmistakable warning signs as the season progressed. Hamilton had grown increasingly disillusioned with the way Ferrari operated, calling internal meetings scattered, communication sloppy, and strategy reactive rather than proactive. He'd come from a world of order, of calculated excellence at Mercedes, where every millimeter mattered. At Ferrari, he found chaos disguised as tradition. It didn't sit well. Leclerc, meanwhile, was no longer the future of Ferrari. He was the present, and in his mind, he had earned that title. He'd endured the rebuild years, suffered the public failures, and carried the burden of expectation with dignity. Now, with Hamilton's arrival, he felt the ground shifting beneath him. Meetings began to include more voices from the British contingent. Setup directions began favoring Hamilton's driving style. Suddenly, the data being prioritized seemed to come from the other side of the garage. Leclerc, a driver known for his emotional intensity, tried to suppress his resentment, but it boiled over in subtle ways. Delayed radio replies, passive-aggressive feedback in debriefs, reluctance to share telemetry. The Australian Grand Prix marked a critical turning point. Both drivers were left exposed to undercuts, and neither received clear instructions on when to push or defend. The lack of coordination was so glaring that even pundits on the broadcast questioned if Ferrari had split its garage in two. After the race, Hamilton's tone during the engineering review was sharp, bordering on accusatory. He allegedly told the team, "We can't win races with crossed wires and egos in the way." Leclerc didn't respond in that meeting, but he walked out before it ended, slamming his notebook shut with enough force to make a junior engineer flinch. What happened in Imola was merely the climax of a long-brewing crisis. The temperature had been rising all season. The tire strategy debacles, the shifting pit sequences, the thinly veiled jabs during press conferences, it all added fuel to the fire. Hamilton, who arrived at Ferrari hoping to shape a legacy and bring structure, found himself facing not just resistance from the organization, but open defiance from the man who believed the team was his. Leclerc wasn't just fighting for wins. He was fighting to protect what he saw as his Ferrari. Even during track walks, body language experts noted a change. Where Hamilton and Leclerc once shared light jokes and mutual respect, they now walked meters apart, avoiding eye contact. During simulator sessions, their engineers increasingly requested private sessions to avoid overlap. One source claimed that Leclerc's team had started locking down data access after Hamilton's group requested revisions to pre-race simulations, something previously done collaboratively. Trust was eroding, molecule by molecule, until there was nothing left but suspicion and frustration. After the Imola blow-up, Ferrari entered crisis management mode. Vasseur held emergency sit-downs with both drivers separately, and then together. The joint meeting reportedly lasted less than 10 minutes before Leclerc walked out, stating, "This is going nowhere." Hamilton remained, arms folded, shaking his head. In that moment, even Vasseur, the man responsible for keeping Ferrari united, looked powerless. Behind the scenes, the factory at Maranello buzzed not with innovation, but with rumors. Mechanics whispered about whose side would be favored in the upcoming upgrades. Engineers speculated whether one of the two would be sacrificed by mid-season to preserve the team's future. Publicly, the drivers kept the facade. Their media appearances were perfectly orchestrated performances of neutrality. But fans noticed. They always do. There were no compliments exchanged. No mutual celebrations. Even in photo ops, the distance between them seemed more than physical. It was ideological, emotional, maybe even permanent. The aura of camaraderie had shattered. What was left was a rivalry masquerading as a partnership. In truth, the question Ferrari now faces isn't how to win a championship, it's how to survive its own internal implosion. Because no car, no matter how fast, can outrun the consequences of a divided garage. And no team, regardless of history or prestige, can function when its two greatest assets are each other's greatest threats. Lewis Hamilton's recent post, just a few words tucked into a dark Instagram story. True strength is silent, but it doesn't stay silent forever. Might as well have been a thunderclap echoing across the entire Formula One world. At first glance, it could have passed for a motivational quote, another cryptic reflection from a driver known for his introspective, almost poetic online presence. But within minutes, it was dissected with surgical precision by fans, analysts, former drivers, and journalists alike. No one was fooled. The timing was razor-sharp. The delivery, cold and deliberate. And the silence that followed? Deafening. It wasn't just the message, it was how and when he said it. The story appeared at 2:47 a.m. Central European Time, long after the European press had gone to sleep, but early enough to hit the morning scroll for the most die-hard fans. The wording wasn't accidental. Silent, repeated like an echo. It felt personal. It felt pointed. And it felt like the culmination of weeks, maybe even months, of suppressed frustration, power struggles, and silent confrontations hidden behind staged smiles and shallow handshakes. Then, as if coordinated by a scriptwriter with a flair for drama, Charles Leclerc struck back. No quote. No direct statement. Just a photo. An image taken earlier this season, after a hard-fought podium, standing tall under the weight of Ferrari red, jaw clenched, eyes burning with pride and perhaps quiet defiance. The caption? Some play politics, others race. 5 words. But those 5 words carried the weight of 100 press releases. They were sharp, surgical, and absolutely impossible to interpret as anything other than a counterpunch. The post dropped just hours after Hamilton's, as if Leclerc had been waiting, watching, preparing his strike. It ignited a firestorm online. Threads exploded on Reddit, with conspiracy theories mapping out everything from private briefings gone wrong to passive-aggressive radio messages from the last 3 races. X was ablaze with polarized opinions, each side sharpening their arguments with memes, screenshots, and old interviews pulled from the archives. Hamilton is exposing the rot inside Ferrari, said one tweet that racked up over 100,000 likes. Another, from a staunch Leclerc fan, read, "He's not playing games. He's protecting his home." Hamilton knew what he was walking into. What started as whispers around the paddock has now erupted into a full-blown civil war at the heart of Ferrari. Team insiders are leaking just enough to stir the pot without putting their jobs at risk. Some say the drivers stopped talking directly weeks ago. That debriefs have turned cold. That Leclerc's camp is shielding data. That Hamilton's engineers are adjusting their tone during strategy meetings, using increasingly protective language. The trust has cracked. The facade is gone. Inside Ferrari's headquarters in Maranello, the tension is reaching unbearable levels. Staff who've worked together for years are allegedly avoiding shared spaces. Team members who used to grab espresso together now take separate routes to the canteen. The once celebrated energy of bringing in a 7-time world champion has turned into something toxic, something electric, something dangerously unstable. Ferrari is no longer managing a driver pairing. It's managing a political minefield. The leadership is scrambling. Reports suggest that John Elkann, the elusive chairman of Ferrari and the Agnelli heir, has been personally briefed. That in itself is extraordinary. Elkann rarely gets involved in operational conflicts. But this isn't about performance anymore. It's about identity, perception, and global brand value. Ferrari is synonymous with legacy, prestige, discipline. Public infighting between their top talents doesn't just damage the team's cohesion, it risks tarnishing the prancing horse's image on a global scale. The stakes are existential. Sources from within Ferrari have confirmed that an emergency summit has been scheduled for early next week. The agenda? Restoring unity, whatever the cost. Both drivers will be required to attend. It's rumored that senior legal advisors will also be present, with the aim of introducing new behavioral clauses into the drivers' contracts. These clauses, still in draft form, would limit public commentary and any social media activity that could be interpreted as damaging to the team or to each other. Some within the team are calling it a gag order. Others say it's long overdue. But here's where the situation becomes even more volatile. The drivers themselves are reportedly resisting. Hamilton, known for fiercely defending his autonomy and voice, is said to be deeply uneasy about any form of silencing. Leclerc, on the other hand, has never been afraid to speak his mind either, especially when he feels his legacy is under threat. Neither man wants to yield. Neither man wants to blink first. This conflict isn't just psychological, it's operational. Engineers are growing anxious. Race strategists are reportedly split down the middle. Some believe Leclerc should be prioritized as the long-term bet, the soul of the team. Others argue that Hamilton's data-driven approach, his relentless discipline, and his global magnetism are what Ferrari needs to finally dethrone Red Bull. The internal debate has become a silent referendum on the team's future. Sponsors are watching closely. At least one major corporate partner has allegedly requested a closed-door meeting to discuss the situation. F1 is a business, and nothing frightens investors more than instability. If Ferrari doesn't get ahead of this, the consequences could ripple far beyond the racetrack. Brand equity, shareholder confidence, driver market leverage. Everything is in flux. And yet, amid all this, something strange is happening. Fans are more engaged than ever. Views are spiking. Comment sections are overflowing. Race predictions are getting more emotional, more personal. This isn't just sport anymore. It's a saga. An unfolding drama where each press conference, each pit stop, each passing maneuver might double as a declaration of war. Every look between Hamilton and Leclerc becomes a headline. Every quote becomes a potential dagger. What's unfolding is bigger than just one season. It's a clash of philosophies. A battle between tradition and reinvention. Between loyalty and ambition. Between the raw instinct of Leclerc and the methodical brilliance of Hamilton. And it's playing out in full view of millions, lap by lap, story by story, pixel by pixel. One thing is certain, whatever silence existed before has now shattered. The gloves are off. The respect is fragile. The air is thick with tension. And in the weeks to come, Ferrari will either forge something extraordinary out of this chaos or watch it burn everything they've built. This isn't just rivalry. It's personal. And it's only just getting started. Toto Wolff didn't raise his voice, didn't flinch, and didn't elaborate, but the damage was already done. His words were sharp, deliberate, and dripped with a knowing condescension. I'm not surprised. That's what happens when two alphas share one den. That half-smile, calm, almost bored, wasn't lost on anyone watching. It wasn't just a remark, it was a diagnosis. A statement from a man who spent years watching empires rise and crumble from the pit wall. A man who's played this exact game before, and walked away with the spoils. But now, it's Ferrari that's playing with fire, and the flames are getting hotter with every passing race weekend. Inside the Scuderia, what was once whispered behind closed doors has now become the loudest noise in the room. The relationship between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, meant to be the ultimate alliance of speed, experience, and promise, is unraveling with unnerving speed. What began as subtle glances, veiled comments, and the occasional tension-filled moment during media duties has evolved into something far more visceral. Two fiercely competitive drivers, both accustomed to being the centerpiece of every operation they've ever touched, are now locked in a slow-burning conflict with no visible exit. The paddock can sense it. The journalists are circling like sharks. Mechanics whisper. Engineers are choosing their words, and their loyalties, more carefully than ever. This isn't a disagreement. It's a Cold War unfolding under the glossy sheen of red paint and team uniforms. The energy inside the Ferrari garage is no longer just electric, it's volatile. And everyone knows it. Hamilton didn't come to Ferrari to play second fiddle. He's a global icon, a multiple world champion, and a man with nothing left to prove but everything still to win. He wants control. He wants results. He wants to lead. And he expects the team to give him the tools, the strategy, and the deference that he believes he's earned. But Leclerc, born from the Ferrari Academy, beloved by the Tifosi, and once seen as the chosen one to bring glory back to Maranello, isn't stepping aside quietly. For him, this isn't just a team, it's home. And seeing that home reshaped around a new arrival, no matter how decorated, cuts deep. They don't speak openly about the friction, but the signs are everywhere. Radio messages that sound just a bit too sharp. Post-race interviews filled with thinly veiled frustration. Strategy calls that leave one driver questioning the team's intent. A double stack that mysteriously favors one over the other. A tire call that leaves one vulnerable to an undercut. These aren't coincidences. They're battle lines being drawn with data and silence. And then, far from the glare of the cameras, Carlos Sainz appears, cool, composed, and impossible to ignore. He's no longer wearing the red, but he hasn't severed the ties. In a quiet corner behind the Ferrari hospitality unit, he's seen talking in hushed tones with engineers he once called teammates. Not once. Not twice. Several times over the last few weekends. No cameras. No PR handlers. Just knowing glances and low voices. It's enough to make anyone wonder, what is being discussed? Contingency plans? An emergency return? An escape hatch for a team staring down the barrel of a self-inflicted disaster? Ferrari's leadership remains silent in public, but insiders whisper of tension at the highest levels. Team principal Frédéric Vasseur, once hailed as the man to bring stability, now finds himself in an impossible position. Hamilton was his bet. A big one. A historic one. But Leclerc is still the future. Still the emotional core of the Ferrari fanbase. Alienating either would be catastrophic. Losing both? Unthinkable. And yet, the current trajectory leads precisely to that outcome. It's a tightrope act with no safety net, and the wind is starting to blow. Every upcoming Grand Prix is no longer just about points or podiums, it's a psychological battlefield. The pre-race briefings are tense. The race strategy meetings are quieter, more calculated. There's a paranoia creeping in. Who's being favored? Who's being misled? Who's actually in control? The trust that should bind a team together is evaporating by the day. One poorly timed undercut, one misjudged pit window, one forced team order, and everything could explode. The Ferrari garage has become a powder keg. Mechanics work diligently but speak in hushed tones. Engineers double-check messages before they're sent. PR staff monitor every word their drivers say with the panic of a publicist handling a scandal in real time. The tension is almost theatrical, but the consequences are very, very real. Fans can feel it. Social media is ablaze. Hashtags like #TeamCharles and #BackHamilton trend almost hourly. Debates rage across platforms, with supporters passionately defending their chosen warrior. Some call it healthy competition. Others call it sabotage in slow motion. Pundits speculate daily, poring over telemetry like forensic analysts, desperate to find proof that the friction is more than just rumor. Meanwhile, rival teams watch with barely disguised amusement. Red Bull sees chaos in its rearview mirror. Mercedes smirks knowingly, recognizing the signs. McLaren remains focused but opportunistic, ready to seize whatever Ferrari leaves on the table. Every rival senses blood in the water, and the scent grows stronger with each race that ends in recrimination instead of celebration. Hamilton wants results, now. Leclerc wants respect, always. Ferrari wants unity, but is getting civil war. And Carlos Sainz? He just might get the last laugh. At this point, the scoreboard barely matters. What matters is control, power, identity. Ferrari doesn't have two drivers, it has two dynasties colliding at full throttle. And in this kind of storm, someone always breaks. Whether it's Hamilton walking away, Leclerc demanding answers, or the team itself fracturing from within, something has to give. Because you can't keep two kings in one castle forever. Eventually, one takes the throne, and the other burns it down.